I knew it was over the moment Stephanie didn't make eye contact. That fresh-faced MBA princess, straight off some venture capital ego trip, sat across from me like I was a quarterly expense report that needed trimming. She smelled like overpriced perfume and ambition. The name's Tom Caldwell, by the way, 53 years old, and I just spent 28 years at TechFlow Dynamics writing the very code that made their defense contracts worth a damn. Now I was being realigned right out the door. Her first words weren't hello or thanks for your service, but let's talk about optimization. Optimization. I'd spent 28 years building the encryption systems that kept our military communications secure, and now this kid was optimizing me into unemployment. She flipped open my review folder like it was a takeout menu. Look, Tom, you've done solid work. Really, but you've been here a long time. We need people who are agile, adaptable. She smiled that shark kind of smile that never touches the eyes. If you're not comfortable with our new direction, the door is right there. You know the type. Fresh MBA, no practical experience, thinks leadership means using buzzwords like synergy and paradigm shifts. Stephanie Brooks was 32 years old and had never written a line of code in her life. But she had an MBA from Wharton and a daddy with venture capital connections. I felt a dead calm settle over me. I looked at the team photo on my desk. Half those engineers I'd hired straight out of college. I remembered staying late with them through system failures and botched deployments, running on vending machine coffee and gas station sandwiches. I remembered missing my daughter's college graduation because our Pentagon server farm crashed during a critical operation. I remembered fighting for their salaries when upper management wanted to cut costs. Now this child was handing me a participation trophy and a real termination folder. So I closed my laptop. No drama, no speeches. I stood up, tucked the folder under my arm, and walked out. Past my team, past the glass conference room full of people pretending not to notice. Past the same HR woman who'd once asked me to mentor her nephew. No one said a word. That kind of silence has weight. It pulls everything down with it. Respect, loyalty, history. But here's what people don't understand about guys like me. Sometimes silence is strategy. I didn't go home right away. I went to Murphy's Diner down the street, got myself black coffee and a moment to think. You know Murphy's, red vinyl booths, waitresses who've been there since the Clinton administration, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I sat there and just breathed, not raging, not planning anything dramatic, just thinking. TechFlow had been my whole adult life. I joined when we were still operating out of a converted warehouse in Arlington, back when defense contractors were scrappy operations run by ex-military guys who understood the mission. I'd watched us grow from a 20-person shop to a $750 million Pentagon favorite. And all of it, the infrastructure, the architecture, the core encryption protocols, had my fingerprints in the foundation. I didn't document everything the way some fresh college kid might. I lived that code. It wasn't in a manual somewhere. It was in my head, built over years of late nights and impossible deadlines. I paid Murphy in cash, walked 2 blocks in the wrong direction just to clear my head. Then I caught a cab. Not an Uber, a damn yellow cab like I used to take back when TechFlow couldn't afford a proper parking garage, and I had to find street parking 6 blocks away. Home smelled like old leather and Rex's dog food. My Labrador looked up from his bed, tail wagging but cautious. Dogs know when something fundamental has shifted in their world. I set the termination folder on my kitchen table, poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff, not the daily drinker, and opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Buried beneath tax returns and expired warranties was a slim manila envelope, no label, just the weight of foresight and old habits. Inside was the original provisional patent application. My name at the top, not TechFlow's. Mine. Filed in August 2008 during one of the company's many chaotic reorganizations when legal was more focused on staying solvent than minding the intellectual property register. I'd been advised by someone much smarter than me, Tony Walsh, my old Navy buddy turned IP attorney, to hold the provisional rights until things settled. Tom, he'd said over beers at a Arlington dive bar, file it under your name. You can always assign it later once the company's stable and they remember to cut you in properly. They never got stable, they just got greedy, and they sure as hell never remembered. TechFlow had been licensing my core encryption framework the entire time. Lawyers had drafted agreements, temporary ones with expiration clauses, and one very specific condition buried in the legal text like a landmine with a 16-year fuse. In the event of involuntary termination without cause, reversion of rights shall trigger automatically within 24 hours of formal notice. Signed, stamped, filed with the USPTO, and nobody at TechFlow ever followed up because nobody thought I would ever leave. I was the foundation guy, the reliable old dog, the one who kept the lights on while executives played musical chairs. Guess what, Stephanie? You just pulled the pin. The funny thing about working in defense for 28 years is you learn to think strategically. You don't react emotionally. You assess the situation, identify your assets, and execute with precision. Right now, sitting in my kitchen with Rex at my feet and bourbon warming my throat, I was doing exactly that. My phone buzzed every few minutes. Slack messages from coworkers trying to figure out what happened. Sorry to hear, Tom. Please stay in touch. The kind of messages people send when they're scared they might be next. HR had sent an exit survey link. Like I was going to rate my execution experience out of 5 stars. I didn't answer any of them. Let them wonder. They'd all stood there and watched it happen like a corporate funeral where nobody brings flowers. Not one person had spoken up when Stephanie handed me that folder. But here's what they didn't know, what Stephanie and her MBA brain trust couldn't possibly understand. I wasn't just another employee walking out the door. I was the architect walking away from a building he still owned the blueprints to. And those blueprints were about to become very, very expensive. I stood in the hallway for a good 10 minutes, staring at the closet I hadn't opened in over a decade. Top shelf. Old banker's box labeled Original IP Archive, Personal. The kind of thing you keep meaning to throw away, but never do. I sat cross-legged on the floor like I was back in the Navy, going through classified documents, brittle printouts and coffee-stained notebooks scattered around me. My handwriting from 2008 looked like it belonged to a different man, one who hadn't yet learned how little the corporate world valued quiet excellence. Then I found it. Manila envelope, thick paper, crisp edges, still sealed with the original notary stamp. The date made my chest tight. August 15th, 2008, filed under my name, not TechFlow's, not on behalf of, mine. Back then, I was just trying to protect my work. We were a small team, and I didn't trust the startup chaos. Half the company was ex-military guys who understood operational security, but the other half were business school types who treated intellectual property like poker chips. Tony had pulled me aside after one of those company happy hours where everyone pretended the funding situation wasn't desperate. Tom, he'd said, I've seen this movie before. File it under your name. You can always sign it over later when things stabilize. They never stabilized. They just got profitable. The formal assignment of rights had always been in process. Legal kept saying they'd handle it after the next funding round, then after the Pentagon contract, then after the IPO talks. But nobody followed up because no one really thought it mattered. I was never going anywhere, right? I was the foundation, the reliable guy who kept the servers humming while executives collected bonuses. Until one of them, Stephanie, with her perfect MBA credentials and zero understanding of what actually made the company valuable, decided to modernize. I stood up, documents in hand, and walked to my desk like it was a command center. Opened the safe I hadn't touched in years. Had to try 3 combinations before I remembered the thing. My daughter's birthday, my enlistment date, the day I started at TechFlow, tucked the envelope inside. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was reconnaissance. I stared at the blinking cursor on my laptop for a while, then opened an encrypted email to Tony. Subject line, need you to verify a clause. I attached a scan of the provisional filing. The fine print was almost elegant in its precision. Should the inventor be terminated involuntarily and without cause, reversion of full ownership shall occur within 24 hours of official notice. I typed, still valid, hit send. Then I sat there in the blue glow of my screen, bourbon warming in my hand, Rex curled against my leg like a silent co-conspirator. The phone buzzed again. Voicemail from Stephanie. I didn't listen. Probably some sanitized corporate speak about knowledge transfer protocols or transition planning. Too late for that. I walked to the window and watched the city lights blink beneath me. 28 years. 28 years of making other people look smarter than they were. of translating technical brilliance into PowerPoint slides for executives who wore suits like armor and used words like synergy and scalable solutions. Well, here's your scalable solution, princess. This wasn't the part where I raged or started applying to competitors. This was the part where I remembered who I was. Not Tom from engineering, not legacy overhead, not the guy they thought would shuffle quietly into retirement. This was the part where strategic thinking kicked in, and they had no idea what was coming. Tony called me back before sunrise, Colorado time. I picked up on the first ring. "Does the clause still stand?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. I could hear papers rustling, the soft click of his reading glasses. Tony was the methodical type, the reason he'd made captain in the Navy and partner at his firm. He didn't give legal opinions based on hope. Finally, he exhaled. "Yes. And if they terminated you Monday at 4:15, it triggered reversion the moment you walked out." I didn't speak. He added, "Tom, you kept that clause active for 16 years. The core encryption patent just reverted to you automatically." I hung up without a goodbye. Not rudeness, just efficiency. There was work to do, and every second counted. That 24-hour window wasn't theoretical. It was real. By the time my kitchen clock read 6:30 a.m., I was logged into the USPTO filing system. The reversion confirmation was a pre-written template, something Tony and I had drafted back in 2008 just in case. I remember him saying, "You probably won't ever need this, but I've seen too many good engineers get screwed by companies that forgot who built their success." Smart bastard. I opened the encrypted folder, double-checked the signature fields, and filled out the formal reversion notification. It wasn't dramatic. No fancy letterhead or cease and desist fanfare, just a quiet checkbox next to involuntary termination without cause, followed by a digital timestamp and a few upload fields. Click submit. That was it. With that single click, ownership of TechFlow's crown jewel, the encryption algorithm that powered their Pentagon contracts, their licensing deals, their entire investor pitch deck, slid back into my hands like a weapon returning to its rightful owner. I didn't celebrate. Just leaned back in my chair, cradled my coffee, and let the silence settle. Rex jumped onto the table and sniffed at the laptop, unimpressed by my newly acquired multi-million-dollar intellectual property. Dogs have perspective. I checked the USPTO system. The update wouldn't be instant. Usually took a few hours to propagate publicly, but once it did, anyone doing a patent lookup would see a different owner. Not TechFlow Dynamics LLC, Thomas J. Caldwell. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes after you arm a nuclear device and realize you're the only one who knows it's live. That was me, standing in my kitchen barefoot, watching the sun rise, holding a reversion clause like a loaded weapon no one remembered I possessed. Across town, TechFlow's leadership team was probably sipping espresso, prepping for their 10 a.m. strategy meeting where they'd throw around words like optimization and agile transformation. Meanwhile, the legal foundation holding up their empire had just vanished. I wasn't going to call them. Wasn't going to warn them. That was the old me. Loyal, predictable, forgiving. The Tom who gave them 28 years and assumed they'd do right by him in return. That version was done. By 7:45 a.m., my inbox pinged. Confirmation receipt from the USPTO. It was official. Patent number 8,472,639 was back where it belonged. And unless TechFlow had filed completely new encryption architecture in the last 24 hours, which they hadn't, every line of code in their next-gen system was now trespassing on my legal property. I opened my laptop again and began drafting something far more interesting than a resume. Licensing terms. I wasn't just going to reclaim what was mine. I was going to make them pay for thinking I was disposable. Not loudly, not in court, not on social media, just with contracts, numbers, royalties, leverage. Because revenge in the digital age doesn't wear war paint. It wears a watermark. Stephanie was in rare form that morning. At least that's what I heard. Word travels fast when you've spent 28 years embedded in a place, especially when half the staff still thinks of you as the guy who kept their systems running while executives collected bonuses. Apparently, she kicked off the product strategy meeting like she was hosting a game show. Arms wide, teeth gleaming, dripping confidence like a used car salesman with a quota to hit. She was talking agile pivots and Q4 dominance, said the next-gen update would revolutionize secure communications. Every feature, every enhancement ran off the same encryption core I'd written during the financial crisis, before TechFlow even had proper server farms. And not one person in that room had thought to check the USPTO filings that morning. I could picture them clustered around the digital whiteboard, dragging blocks labeled Core Engine and Security Module like kids playing with dynamite. Stephanie probably mentioned me once, if at all. Maybe as legacy architecture, or worse, the old system. By 11:30, my phone buzzed. Caller ID, Paul Richardson. Paul from development, who used to bring me donuts during late-night debugging sessions and once called me at 3 a.m. because his encryption implementation broke the test environment 2 hours before a Pentagon demo. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Hey, Tom," his voice was careful, like he was approaching a wounded animal. "Quick heads up, we're moving your old code into the new build this week. Pentagon demo got moved up to Wednesday. Kinda weird without you here." I let that sit in the air like a bad smell. Then I said, "Good luck with that." He paused. "Wait, what do you mean?" Click. Let them figure it out. This was the part people never understood about guys like me. I didn't scream, I didn't threaten lawsuits, I didn't write angry reviews or call their investors. I let the rope tighten on its own, and it was tightening fast. By noon, TechFlow's legal inbox had received the USPTO reversion notification. But here's the kicker. Nobody read it. Because in companies like TechFlow, the legal team only checks what the executives tell them to check. And the executives were too busy high-fiving each other to realize the floor was about to drop out. Stephanie strutted through the halls like she'd conquered Rome, not realizing Rome had already filed a 30-page IP enforcement memo and was sipping bourbon by the fireplace. From what I heard later, she even made some crack in the break room about how clean the transition was. Something like, "He didn't even fight it. Guess he knew it was time." Yeah, Stephanie, I knew exactly what time it was. They were hours away from pushing a live demo that was 100% dependent on code they no longer legally owned. Every commit, every push, every scheduled integration test was now a line item on my licensing ledger, and I wasn't charging friendship rates. That afternoon, I started getting LinkedIn messages. Little pings from engineers and analysts pretending to check in, but all dancing around the same question. What happened? One even said, "Stephanie's saying you resigned." Of course she was. Stephanie's the type to gaslight a house fire. I didn't reply to any of them. Not yet. Let them feel that itch in the back of their brains, that creeping sensation that something was off. That wasn't imagination. That was the algorithm screaming through every line of code. I don't belong to you. Later that evening, I logged into the USPTO public access system again. There it was. Patent number 8472039. Status updated. Owner, Thomas J. Caldwell. Date of reversion, time-stamped to the minute of my termination. No red flags, no warnings. Just a single name change that no one at TechFlow had bothered to notice yet. But the clock was ticking, and the slow burn had begun. It started with a kid, one of those overambitious summer interns TechFlow scoops up from expensive universities and feeds into the legal department like fish food. His name was probably Austin or Preston, doesn't matter. He was tasked with monitoring USPTO activity for competitor filings. Standard procedure, just click around, look for anything suspicious, flag if necessary. A box to check until he typed in TechFlow's own patent numbers and saw my name staring back at him. I can only imagine the moment. Mouth probably went dry. Highlighter froze mid-stroke. Maybe he thought he'd clicked the wrong link. Maybe he refreshed the page 5 times, hoping a browser glitch would magically undo a corporate aneurysm. But the truth just sat there blinking on his screen. Inventor and owner, Thomas J. Caldwell. Effective date, 24 hours post-involuntary termination. He flagged it. Emailed it to his supervisor with a subject line like, possible issue. Corporate speak for, I don't want to die for this. Legal read it, paused, probably reread it 10 times, then dug through their dusty agreement folder and found the clause. The one they'd filed and promptly forgotten. The one I'd slipped in like a silent tripwire 16 years ago. It was airtight. TechFlow's $750 million defense contracts were now legally squatting on property they didn't own, and they'd already sent invitations for the Pentagon demo. Stephanie, of course, handled it with all the finesse of a reality TV star caught in a scandal. I'm told she laughed when legal brought it to her. It's probably a clerical error, she said. Clerical error. Like the USPTO just accidentally handed over the company's most valuable IP to the guy she fired 48 hours ago. Then she doubled down, told legal to keep it quiet until after the demo, said they'd iron it out post-launch, and accused the legal team of chasing phantom problems. Phantoms. I'll be sure to carve that on her career's tombstone. Meanwhile, the development team kept working like everything was fine. They had no idea they were running daily builds, scheduling final QA, printing glossy materials with buzzwords like proprietary technology and patent-protected architecture, all of which now technically belonged to me. They were building a house on land they didn't own. Every hour that passed tightened the noose, because once you demo something publicly, once you claim it as your own under IP law, that's infringement. And infringement with knowledge, that's willful, which means triple damages. But Stephanie didn't care. She was too busy updating her LinkedIn with phrases like driving technological innovation and transforming legacy systems. Legal quietly began drafting a worst-case risk memo. I know this because one of the junior attorneys forwarded it to a friend who forwarded it to me. The subject line, patent reversion, urgent. The memo was 4 pages long, but the last line said everything. Recommendation, postpone demo until IP ownership clarified. It was marked confidential, senior management only. Translation, don't let the board see this yet. Because that's what Stephanie feared most. Not the law, not the consequences. The board. She hadn't told them I was gone. Not officially. She'd buried my departure under a line item in the org chart update and phrased it like workforce optimization. She told them the next-gen system was ready, that everything was on schedule, that TechFlow was cruising toward a major Pentagon contract renewal, so the board still didn't know. And the demo was tomorrow. Tick, tick, tick. The call came at 6:35 a.m., just as I was letting Rex out for his morning routine. I knew that number by heart, though I hadn't seen it flash on my screen in nearly 8 years. General William Stone, retired, the founder, the ghost in TechFlow's machine. He'd stepped back a decade ago, retreating to some ranch in Montana with bad cell service and better whiskey. But Bill wasn't like the VCs or boardroom suits who came after. He didn't care about buzzwords or quarterly projections. He understood the guts of the thing, knew the difference between flash and substance, which made it all the more insulting that he'd let people like Stephanie slither into the soul of what we'd built. I let it ring twice before picking up. Tom. His voice still carried that command authority. Aged bourbon and disappointment wrapped in static. Bill, I said, pouring coffee. Long time. I just got an alert from USPTO. Patent 8,472,639. It lists you as the owner. I said nothing. Just waited. Is this some mistake? No. Another beat. That can't be. You assigned that to TechFlow. No, Bill, I said calmly. I didn't. We never filed the final transfer. Remember? I was told it would be formalized after the Series B funding. Legal got reshuffled, then reshuffled again. It never got done. He went quiet. I could hear him breathing slower now. Processing. Tom, this is our core encryption system. I know. Finally, he asked it. Why now? I let the question settle between us like dust in a server room. Then I said, because your people terminated me without cause. Because the clause we wrote 16 years ago just kicked in. He groaned low, like an animal hit center mass. That was never supposed to be permanent. I trusted people would honor the deal. Silence. They didn't, I said. Click. He hung up. I didn't expect an apology. I didn't want one. I just wanted him to understand. 25 minutes later, he was seen storming into TechFlow HQ. I got the play-by-play from 3 different people within the hour. One said he came through the front doors like a hurricane in cowboy boots. No appointment, no entourage. Just the founder, face red, hair wild, waving a printed copy of the patent listing like it was a death certificate. He didn't go to Stephanie's office first. He went to legal. Smart. Bill wasn't the type to scream, but his presence was loud enough. The intern who first spotted the reversion said Bill stood in front of the general counsel's desk and asked one question. Did we ever formalize the IP transfer for Caldwell's encryption core? And when the answer came back, stammered, incomplete, laced with half-assed excuses, he closed his eyes and muttered something unprintable. Then he did go to Stephanie's office. And that, I'm told, was not quiet. Demo day landed like a meteor. TechFlow's downtown conference center had been polished to perfection. Brushed steel, sterile spotlights, a 40-foot LED wall flashing, "Next Gen is now." Rows of leather seats filled with Pentagon liaisons, existing contractors, Defense Department officials, every person whose signature or budget approval mattered. Stephanie stood backstage in a navy blazer 2 sizes too confident. She was smiling, joking with the CTO, doing that thing executives do where they believe charisma can outpace competence. And for a minute, it looked like it might work. The intro video played, glossy stock footage of satellites, server farms, diverse engineers smiling at monitors. The audience applauded politely. Stephanie adjusted her mic, walked to center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice smooth with self-satisfaction, "what you're about to see is the future of secure communications, a platform that will revolutionize how our military approaches encrypted data transmission." She gestured to the screen behind her where the system UI loaded up. "Sleek, familiar, mine. In the next 15 minutes," she said, "we'll walk you through our most advanced iteration yet, powered by our proprietary encryption engine, developed right here at TechFlow." That's when legal moved. Not fast, not panicked, just deliberate. A tall woman in a blazer 3 shades too dark to be accidental stepped onto the stage from the wing and leaned close to Stephanie's ear. "I wasn't there, but I know what was said. We can't demo that system. We don't own the patent anymore." Stephanie blinked, laughed too loud. "Excuse me, small technical hiccup," she told the crowd. "Give us just a moment." She stepped aside with legal. The mic was still on. The whole front row heard her whisper, "What are you talking about? We've always owned that code." "No, Stephanie," legal replied. "You never did. Thomas Caldwell owns the IP. The reversion is final. It's logged. It's live. If we demo this, we're in willful infringement territory." The blood left Stephanie's face like it had been called home. Whispers started in the back. Phones lit up. Then it happened. Someone had leaked the USPTO documents to the Pentagon officials. Full printouts of the patent listing, along with the reversion clause in plain language, were being passed around the room. A Pentagon official stood up, holding the papers. "Thomas J. Caldwell," she said. "I believe this is the patent registration referenced in your marketing materials." Stephanie squinted. "I'm not sure where that came from." "Public record," the official said. "We all have it now." No one looked at the stage anymore. They were reading, sharing, connecting dots. That code, that system, it wasn't TechFlow's, it was his. Tom wasn't in the room, but his name was everywhere. On the documents, in the code, etched into the very DNA of the company Stephanie claimed to lead. By the time Stephanie tried to salvage it, rambling about roadmap transparency and partnership opportunities, half the audience had already left. Quietly, deliberately. The demo was dead, and everyone noticed the absence of applause. I woke up the next morning to the kind of silence that only happens after something has exploded. Rex was still asleep, but my phone was vibrating like a paint mixer. 203 missed calls. The notification bar was a massacre. Voicemails, texts, LinkedIn messages from people I hadn't talked to in years. 2 urgent emails flagged from TechFlow Legal. A message from Paul that just said "holy shit" and one from Bill. I scrolled for a moment, didn't open anything, then pressed call back on the most recent missed call from Bill. He picked up on the first ring. No greeting, just raw panic. "Tom, what do you want?" Not "can we fix this?" Not "how do we walk it back?" Not even "I'm sorry." He already knew none of that mattered anymore. I didn't answer him on the phone. I didn't need to. 30 minutes later, I sent an email. Subject line, terms. Inside was a bullet point list. Calm, surgical, no legal jargon. Full licensing agreement for TechFlow to continue using patent number 8,472/39. $15 million upfront payment plus 12% ongoing royalties. Seat on the board with voting privileges. Public acknowledgement of original authorship. Stephanie Brooks' immediate resignation. I ended it with a single sentence. This is not revenge. This is realignment. Then I hit send. No signature, no warmth, just business. Bill didn't reply immediately. I didn't expect him to. He was likely still in crisis mode, trying to explain to investors why the guy they'd erased from the company now held every card in the deck. 4 hours later, my terms were accepted. All of them. I didn't celebrate. Just leaned back in my chair, Rex at my feet, and watched the city through my window. Somewhere across town, Stephanie was probably cleaning out her office, learning the hard way that you don't fire the architect unless you own the blueprints. And the blueprints, it turned out, had my name on them all along. That evening, I poured myself a double and sat on my back deck. The phone had finally stopped buzzing. Tomorrow, I'd go back to TechFlow, not as Tom from engineering, but as Thomas J. Caldwell, board member and patent holder. Some people call it revenge, I call it market correction. Because when you've spent 28 years building something, you don't just walk away quietly. You make sure everyone remembers who really built it.